Welcome to the Doskocil Law Podcast.
Welcome to the Doskocil Law Podcast with attorney Christopher Doskocil, an AV preeminent rated Missouri lawyer with more than 28 years of experience in family law, estate planning, and civil litigation. Chris believes good lawyering starts with honesty and ends with results, not promises. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about divorce in Missouri. Chris will walk us through what to expect from start to finish, how custody and support decisions are made, and what really happens when it's time to divide property. This is Divorce in Missouri, what to expect from start to finish. Chris, welcome back.
Good morning, Evan. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to be seen. When someone first calls you about a divorce, what do they usually want to know right away?
Wow. I like to start off by asking them, do you have answers? Do you have questions that you're really concerned about right away? Or do you want me to start by explaining the process? Everybody has different needs and wants. So sometimes people go, I have this big concern. I go, well, let's talk about that. And then somebody goes, well, I've never done this before, so explain it to me a little bit how it works. And that's how I approach the initial phone call in the beginning. But eventually, I can explain the whole process to them in 10 minutes or so and then deal with their particular issues and answer their question.
Can you unpack that process? What does that look like in Missouri from beginning to end, that process of divorce?
I like to keep it short and sweet. So I tell people, look, it can be complicated, but it's really not. All we're doing is dividing up your stuff. Okay? It's your stuff, and you're going to probably walk away with half of it.
Yep.
And the other thing is, if you have children, we're going to have something called a parenting plan that says where your children are going to be, who they're going to be with every minute of the year. Every minute will be accounted for. Where they're going to be, times, days, holidays, school, weekends, all that. And we can do this the hard way, in a contested manner where people argue about everything, who's going to get what, or we can do it a lot less expensively in an uncontested format. So when I start explaining to them that I can do an uncontested divorce for less than $2,000, or if you and your spouse hate each other and aren't communicating and cooperating, we'll start with $4,000 just to get started.
Wow.
And they go, really? And I go, yeah. So maybe you might want to at least have a conversation with this person, if it's possible. It's not always possible. There's a lot of situations where it's like, oh, they're not going to talk. That's not ever going to happen again. But if people can just sit down and say, look, all we're doing is dividing up our stuff.
Yeah.
And figuring out where our kids are going to be every day of the year, we can do that. We're grown, responsible adults. We're both employed. We've been raising these kids. We're just not going to be married anymore.
Right.
But because guess what? At the end, the result is the same. So you can spend a lot of money doing it, and people do, because there's sometimes people can be very separated from reality.
Yeah.
And a lot of, believe it or not, I think this whole, believe it or not, we didn't used to have an internet, but I find that people that go online and they learn a lot more than about the process and about what's going to happen. They're coming to me with, in other words, they're coming to me and they have a basic understanding of what's going to happen. And then so when I tell them, look, I know how this is going to end. We're going to divide up your stuff and have a parenting plan. You're going to get there. If you're going to get divorced, this is how it's going to end. So you can do it the very expensive way, or you can work and cooperate, because if you have children, you're going to be dealing with that person, the other parent, for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Really not necessary to burn bridges, burn the barn down, whatever, whatever, kill the horse, whatever uh, acronym you want to use. It's always better to part ways amicably because you got a whole life in front of you with your children that you want to. It's going to be better for your kids if you can get along.
So how important is it for people to understand the difference between a contested and an uncontested divorce before things start?
Well, I think it's something they need to know right from the beginning. A lot of people don't even, I said they come to me with a basic understanding of the process, but they don't know is that they can do it. They can get divorced an easy way, a less expensive way, and still have the same result. And when you explain the cost differences, that light bulb goes on brightly. And they go, you know what? I think it's going to be difficult, but we're talking about doing this anyway. I'm going to sit down and have a conversation and see how far we might get on coming to terms before I call you back and tell you we're ready to go. So sometimes sometimes people, I think I persuade people at least half the time to do an uncontested divorce that they didn't know that could happen that way. But sometimes people, by the time they call me, the relationship is destroyed for whatever reason. And we all know what those reasons can be. And there's lots of them. And that's just not going to happen. So they have no choice but to go through a contested divorce. But it's nice to inform people that there is an option out there, but it's up to them to make that happen. And not all uncontested divorces end that way.
But what about when the children are involved? You kind of talked about it, but what factors does Missouri courts look like to decide that custody and that parenting time that you were talking about?
Well, there are statutory factors that the court must consider for custody, and um, and people fight about their kids more than anything else. Okay, so that's just a battle that if it's going to happen, it's always going to be intense. But back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was just presumed that the mother was the nurturer and the person who was going to uh, have more custody time than the father because women are just better at that. Well, and I was opposed to that way back when, and my colleagues thought I was nuts. But it turns out, come around 2008 or 9 or 10 or so, we're getting all these psychological articles here saying that we got a bunch of messed up kids running around because they only saw their daddy on the weekends. So, and we've seen this develop over the last 10 years, maybe 15, where courts are, especially now, it was a process. It took a long time for the courts to get there. But the courts now are, for the most part, let's start the conversation with the kids are going to see each parent as much as the other. Let's start with that and let's figure out if we can make that happen,
Right.
or if for some reason we can't. So one reason that it might not happen is because, well, somebody's got to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and be at work at 6. Well, it's hard to get kids to school when you have that kind of schedule. Or another one is geographical undesirable, right? So if one parent moves 40 miles away from where the kids have always been, well, it's going to be really hard to exercise midweek custody time because you just live too far away to get the kids to school or to take them to their activities after school. And most kids have activities, whether it's dance or Cub Scouts or gymnastics or judo or basketball. A lot of kids these days are really involved in sport. sports and activities. And it's important. I think the courts feel this way too. It's important for kids to be involved in those things and for the parents to be involved in those things with them. And if your work or the fact that you moved 40 minutes away is going to make that a little bit more difficult. So now we're going to have to think, how are we going to make this work? All right. And there's many ways to there's no right or wrong answer. There's no black or white. This is how we do things. I have to come to an understanding of the people's lives, my clients' lives. Where do you work? What time do you have to be there? How do you get to work? When do you come home from work? Where do your kids go to school? Where is that in relationship to your employment? And what activities are they in? And when do they go to these activities? Is it after school? Is it daycare? Is it at night? How are we going to make this happen? And I like to, in the beginning, when I have a more contested situation, I tell people, look, you're living together now, or you just recently separated. Your life post-divorce is going to be closer to what it was when you were married if you live closer together. There's just no way that you can be an active, involved parent if you both live a half an hour away from each other.
It's true.
There's just too much lost time traveling. So I encourage my clients, look, yeah, you're going to live separate and apart. You can't live together. There's another big one. Well, people are going through a divorce living together. And it's like, gosh, that's not good. I tell, my saying is, it's highly more likely that someone's going to get a sleepover with new friends and a free bologna sandwich when you're living together going through a divorce. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want more problems. This is a very difficult process for the person inside.
Absolutely.
It's one of the worst. There's death of parents, death of spouses and kids, and then right up there is going through a divorce.
No question.
And so I try to help people not only with the legal side of it, but say, hey, you need to live not far away from each other, because kids are important to people. 9 times out of 10, maybe 99% of the time, that's the most important thing. And I said, this is how you make it happen. This is what you need to do.
When emotions are running high, how do you temper those emotions when it comes to these children, and how to keep these parents focused on doing what's best for them during the case?
That's a big answer. It all depends on the person. Everybody's different. Some things that some of my tools are, I have to tell people, look, just because you're a better parent doesn't mean the other parent's a bad parent. The children have 2 parents, okay? And just because the parents decide that they're not going to live together anymore doesn't mean the kids should suffer, right? So yeah, maybe you're better at cooking the kids' meals and getting them ready for school than the other parent, but that doesn't mean that the children should be deprived of the other parent, because children need both parents. And gosh, I think, I'm no psychologist, but I think children want to see both parents an equal amount of time. They don't want it because they perceive that as, wow, how come I only get to see daddy a couple of days a week, but I'm always with mommy? That's just a recipe for disaster for children. And then I think, so I encourage, like I said, the courts now start with, let's have a conversation about custody, and let's start with a 50-50 or an equal parenting time. And we'll go from there if we can't make it work.
How does Missouri's equitable distribution rule work when it comes to dividing property? We talked about the kids, we talked about certain things in divorce, but what about that when it comes to that other thing that can become contentious?
Again, we like to start off with, let's here's the process. Here's how I explain it. You're gonna fill out financial forms and tell me what you have, and then I'm gonna get documents to support your assets and debts. So we know that what you have, how it's titled, how much it's worth, whether you got it before the marriage, whether you inherited it, whether it was a gift. These are all important words, right? These are things we focus on. And then with that, once we have the information, I develop what's called a marital estate or a balance sheet. This is all your stuff, right? And let's just say that number comes to $1 million. So we divide by 2. You're going to get $500,000. The other person's going to get $500,000. Now let's go up to the marital estate and pull out the pieces into each pile to get to $500,000. And that's where we start. But like I said, other things factor into this, like separate property, inherited property, gifted property. And then things get really complicated when you have people who own a business with employees. And that's where it can get, that's where it gets, where you need to know what you're doing and do it a few times to be able to handle it well.
And Chris, before filing, what should people get in order financially or personally to make this process smooth, even though it's a difficult thing and it's happening? Like, how can they make it smoother once it begins?
Realistic expectations, and that starts at the beginning with the first phone call. I have to explain to them the process and what to expect. I think, like I told you and last time we talked, I don't sell sunshine and rainbows here. I tell people what the process is and what they can expect. And as we go through the process, they're going to have questions and concerns and problems that need to be addressed. And I've been doing this long enough that I know how things should go or how a judge will view what's going on. And I say, you might think that your plan is a good plan, but I can tell you in front of this judge, that's not a good plan.
All right.
Don't do that. You're just making my job more difficult, and it's probably going to backfire on you. So I got an idea. Let's do this. Let's do it this way and approach your problem in this manner so we eliminate problems and eliminate stress and anxiety and conflict. That's a big word. Reducing conflict. That's what we try to do around here. Let's reduce the conflict so we can come to a mutually agreeable resolution, because really that's what's best for people moving forward. Like I said, you had children with this person. This person's going to be in your life for the rest of your life, whether you divorce them or not. So let's try to do it in an amicable way, not in a way where you're going to hate each other forever, because that's just not good, right? Nobody wants to go through life angry at somebody. It's just not good for your heart. It's not good for your soul. We need to be positive people and have positive experiences, and that's how we get our children to grow up to be responsible, good adults.
Well said. Chris, thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. That's it for today's episode of the Doskocil Law Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about attorney Christopher Doskocil and his work at the Doskocil Law Firm, visit doskocillaw.com. You'll find straightforward information and honest guidance from a lawyer who's been helping Missouri families for more than 28 years. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone that might find this information helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.